There are moments in life that quietly or suddenly change everything. A diagnosis, a loss, a decision you didn't expect to make. And once that moment happens, the real question becomes, then what? Welcome to Change Happened, Then What? A storytelling podcast about the moments that shape us and the lives we build after them. Each episode brings you a real story told with honesty and care, where everything was questioned and where even then they chose to keep moving forward. This isn't an interview show. It's a place for real stories shared thoughtfully, sometimes messy, sometimes hopeful, but always human. I'm your host, Heather Holt, and I'm so glad you're here. Before we begin, I want to invite you into something I'm doing called the Changed Me Community Drawing. Stay tuned to the end of the episode to find out how you can enter into our monthly drawing for a super cozy Change Happened trucker hat or a super soft tee. Now, let's dive in. One year ago, on March 28th, I released the first episode of Change Happened, Then What? At the time, I didn't fully know where this podcast would lead. I only knew that stories had shaped my life in ways I could not ignore, and that there was something inside me that wanted to tell them. What I didn't realize then was that the seed for this podcast had actually been planted almost 20 years earlier by my friend, Jeannie. Jeannie and I met during a time when both of our lives were shifting in ways neither of us could have predicted. From the very beginning, she saw something in me that I wasn't quite ready to see in myself. For years, she encouraged me to get behind a microphone, to use my voice, to share stories in a bigger way. It only took me about 20 years to finally figure that out. Somewhere along the way, I realized that the things I loved most, audio engineering, editing, and storytelling, could all live in the same place. Podcasting became the perfect medium for me. It allowed me to step away from traditional interviewing and move into something that felt more like my own version of art, storytelling. And one of the most important stories I knew I needed to tell was Jeannie's. Long before this podcast existed, Jeannie experienced a loss that would change her life forever. Her daughter, Isla, died in a tragic accident. There are some losses that defy language. Losing a child is one of them. But when Jeannie talks about Isla, what you hear most clearly isn't just grief. It's love. Over the years, Jeannie has shared the quiet ways Isla still shows up in her life. The small moments of connection that remind her that love doesn't simply disappear. One of those moments became something she calls Isla's moon. And now I can't look at a full moon without thinking of them, especially the August full moon. There's something about the way it rises, big and bright, hanging low in the sky that makes you stop and look up for a moment. Most people know it by another name, but for me, when that moon rises each August, it isn't the sturgeon moon. It's Isla's moon. Some stories leave marks on your heart. Isla's story left one in the sky. As this podcast marks its 1-year anniversary, it felt important to return to the story that helped shape the heart of this show. For this release, I've also taken the time to remaster the original audio. Over the past year, I've learned so much about recording, producing, and crafting these stories, and I wanted this episode to reflect that growth while preserving the honesty of the original conversation. So, today, I'm sharing it with you again. exactly 1 year from the day when it first aired. If you're hearing this story for the first time, welcome aboard. And if you've been here since the beginning, thank you for walking this path with me. This is Isla's Moon. Let me introduce you to Jeannie, a remarkable woman who has been a pillar of strength in my life for over 20 years. Initially, I thought she would be just my banker, but she turned out to be so much more. We bonded over a shared grief when I lost my brother and she lost her precious 8-year-old daughter in a tragic car accident. For over 20 years, Jeannie has been my unwavering supporter, encouraging me to share my story and step behind the mic. And now, here I am, behind the mic, with Jeannie as my first guest. And I couldn't be more excited to share her incredible journey with you. Over 2 decades ago, she faced the unimaginable loss of her only daughter, Isla, in a tragic car accident. Yet through this heart-wrenching experience, she discovered a miraculous way to stay connected with her beloved daughter. I looked up the Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition of grief, and it says this: grief is a deep sorrow, especially that caused by someone's death. It can also refer to trouble or an annoyance, which I think we can all agree a death in our experience is definitely an annoyance. I also know that Jeannie has her own definition of grief, and it is this: acceptance. And she says, when we step into true acceptance of our grief, we can heal our grief. She goes on to say in her teachings that sometimes, in order to move on, it is important to look back every now and then to the space between the years. Then I compare the two definitions and I realize that both are true. And depending on where you are on your journey, one may be more true for you than another. And through her journey, Jeannie has shown that even in the darkest moments, there is a path to healing and a way to keep the memory of loved ones alive in our hearts. Let's dive in.
Hey, Heather, I'm so happy to be on your show. First off, just have to introduce myself because I know you know me because we go back years. So when I think about your audience today and I think about who am I, what am I am completely different from where you and I, when we first started, because it's been a beautiful journey of awakening and really uncovering and discovering all the beauty in the world. And I really believe this, and I hope people who are listening can agree that it's sometimes the darkness that brings you the light. So 25 years in banking, as you know, helping you get your business started, marketing and helping people do that aspect and connecting and networking and all that led me to Florida, where I have changed all that. And now I just have my beautiful spiritual business, my YouTube channel, where I help people connect to their own spirituality and to this day still get through those dark times by adding light to their life.
I know this isn't the story that defines her life today, but it is important to share because it shaped everything that followed. Jeannie's going to take us back to that fateful day, the moment her world shifted, the day she learned that Isla would never come home again. The pain, the disbelief, the kind of heartache that no parent should ever have to carry. How did you even begin to process this unimaginable loss?
My story starts where most stories start. I got the call. I got the call from my ex-husband's ex-wife, to tell me that there had been an accident and I needed to get to the hospital as soon as I could. So many questions when you first get the call. I did just as I was told. I got to the hospital to find out that my daughter and her grandmother were both in the accident. The grandmother had also passed that day, and that my daughter at the time when the accident took place was non-responsive at the scene. They had brought her back. They brought her in. She was in another room, and I was met at the door from a social worker who was going to take me down to see her for the very first time. And I won't forget that because the woman pulled me into a room and said to me,
I feel like I need to prepare you before you see your daughter for the chance of her actually living.
And it was the actual living part that really brought home how significant this accident had actually been, because she knew that if my daughter was going to live, that there would be a whole other aspect of this that I needed to prepare myself for. So that was my kind of first awareness that this was not, it was getting worse as we were going on, right? So when I got in to see my daughter for the very first time, I was first grateful that, yes, she had been in a tragic accident and there was head trauma, but she didn't appear to look like somebody who had been in that type of an accident. There was a little bruise over one of her eyes, and her nickname was Eye, so it was all manageable at this point. But I will tell you, as soon as I saw her, I knew she was not there. I felt that disconnection of life. A mother knows, right? So I remembered the machine started to kind of go off and beep, and they started to move me out of the way, and something was kind of happening at that moment. And I remembered asking my sister, who was with me in the room, what are they doing? Why are they doing this? Almost like, leave her alone, right? And my sister looked at me and said,
Jeannie, they are trying to save your daughter right now.
So that was kind of the beginning. And I won't go into all the detail of what it was like to be in the hospital with all the ups and downs and the rest of it. But I will tell you that at 2:00 that afternoon, they pronounced her brain dead. And from that moment, I stayed in the hospital until there was nothing else to do as far as signing the papers and the rest of it. I left at 5:00 that afternoon. And there's where this story really starts, because on the other side of the door and on the other side of the glass was that moment where I was about to step into my new life. And I think of the name of your podcast, Change Happened, Then What? There's that moment of uncertainty. I didn't know how, I didn't know where, I didn't know what, I didn't know what, I didn't know anything. I was still in complete shock walking out. Wasn't even sure where I was going to go. Home, in the car. I mean, that true feeling of lost in one moment is something that, for anyone who's had to be in that experience, it is terrifying, absolutely terrifying. Thank you for letting me share that.
I don't know how many times I have heard that story over the years, and I can never control my tears. As I edit this, I still feel the tears welling up in my eyes. And it was in the months that would follow, Jeannie would find herself in the depths of grief, the deep, dark kind of grief, where you don't know if your clothes are on inside out or not. You don't know if you remember to turn the stove off before you left the house. Did I lock the door? Did I feed the dog? Did I drive here? Oh my God, how am I even still alive? And then one night, Jeannie would get a message. And that message was from.
And I hear it and I go, what? Like,
it's this little voice in my head. Now remember where I am in my grief. I'm not reading people yet. I'm not working with people spiritually. I'm not helping other mothers grieve. I am in the thick of my grief trying to get through the first anniversary, okay? And I hear this little voice say,
"Get the jar, Mommy. Get the jar."
And I knew what the jar was, so let me take a second to tell you what the jar was. The jar was this, if you remember, this little jar that sat on her gravesite, and it said, "Please don't come here and grieve. I'm trying to get through the holidays, and I really don't want it to be this negative thing. If you're coming here and you're grieving in any way, can you shift this to a story about my daughter and place it in the jar?" And I'm hoping that other people who come here will also just immerse in this jar, and they'll all be okay with it, and we'll get through together, you know, because my whole life has been community, right? So, you know, it takes a village, you know, and I think being part of a big family and, you know, all that, and my spiritual community and my work community, and everything was always that, right? I wasn't going to do it alone. I hear this and I get pissed, like you and your weather right now. It's freaking cold. I know where the graveyard is. It's down at the end of the street. My daughter and I used to do spooky walks in the graveyard. So I know it's cold. I have no intention of going to get in this jar, but my daughter is insisting.
"Get the jar, Mommy. Get the jar."
So I kind of put the covers over my head. I'm kind of freaking out because it really does sound like her. And I'm thinking, why would I think this, okay? Why would this thought come into my head? But it makes sense because I know there's a jar in her graveyard. So this goes on for 20 minutes. Now I'm starting to get pissed and I can't sleep. So I make the stupid or the best choice I've ever made, and I throw the covers back, and I'm angry, and I get in the car, right? Because I'm grieving and I'm not thinking straight. I drive to the graveyard. I get out. I'm post-holing through the snow. I'm on my way to her gravestone, and this is not a place I want to be because it terrifies me to be in this graveyard by myself. And I walk over and I grab the jar, and I remember pulling the jar to my chest and saying to my daughter on the other side, "This better be freaking good." You know what I mean? Like, this, whatever, why I am listening, you know, I'm angry, but I'm also like, all right, you know, you better make this good when I get home. There better be a good reason in here. So I get home. I'm thinking some beautiful little note, something spiritual is going to happen here. And I dump this jar out on my bed, and I start going through the notes. And sure enough, I find this note in the jar that is so bad. Someone had showed up pissed that I was asking to be happy, and don't know who it is. I don't think it was my ex-husband. Not going to put that out there that it was, but I think it was someone that was on his side of his thinking and grief, you know, at the time. And again, everything's changed since then, right? So it's, you know, you bitch, you know, I can't believe this is what you're asking people to do, you know, and, you know, if there's a God, you know, do you think you think your daughter would be where she is? And, you know, and just, it's like every opposite thing that I was trying. You know what I mean? It's like the vial within the vial within the vial of the grief, right? So when I talk about vial, I'm talking about like getting sick vial. Not vial as in jar, you know. So okay, there's my moment. Okay, it's gonna be hard to say it without. There's my moment, right?
There's your moment.
There's my moment. I drop, you know, I drop over the note. And now I remember hearing, you know, years ago, give it up to God, right? You know, it's bigger than you can handle, and, you know, so offer it up, right? So now I'm like in a rage. And thank God it was winter because the doors were closed, because I really do, and not to be dramatic, if the windows had been open, someone would have heard me. I am screaming at the top of my lungs, and it's not good. And I say to this person who I believe to be my savior, my God, right? You know, and I'm going, that's it. I'm done. You know, like, I'm done. I can do it. You know, like, you want it. Everybody tells me to give it up to you. You know, this is more than I can bear. So imagine in that moment that it was more than leaving the hospital, more than pulling the plug, more than getting the call. It was, I have tried to remain positive through this whole thing and like, the grace of God and blah, blah, blah. And here I am, somebody's just kicking me at the knees when there's nothing left to kick, right? And I'm on my knees, literally. So that moment, I didn't know what was going to happen next, but that is my turnaround moment. That is my change happens, then what? Because I went to bed that night, too sick to call into work. I can't go to work the next day because I've been up all night wailing. Call out to work, just in the thick of my grief. I'm going to stay home all day and feel sorry for myself. And all of a sudden, the school calls at like 11 o'clock. Now, coincidentally, the person who calls me is the principal of my daughter's school, who ended up being the number one mentor in my life, that came into my life when I was in high school, getting ready to make all the wrong decisions, those decisions, right? I'm going to either go to class or go into the woods. You know what I mean? Because woods meant I could do all the things you're not supposed to do in the woods at high school, okay? I'm either going to be part of the program or I'm going to be part of the problem, and what deck I was on back in my high school. So this woman came into my life at a critical time and who, got me into cheerleading and told me I could do it and gave me hope and all this. She calls me because she's the principal of my daughter's school now. And she says,
Jeannie, we are on our way to go to the graveyard because we all have notes for the jar at the graveyard. But the jar is not there. Can I come over and bring them to you? And
so I'm like, yeah. Okay, so she shows up at my house. We have a beautiful cup of tea. We spent the morning, crying together. And she brings in this box that was too big to go into the jar anyway. So it all kind of was, but the point is that from that moment on, everything changed. Yeah. I wasn't carrying it anymore. I literally, and hate to sound cliche, but I got to that moment where I realized that it wasn't for me to do. It wasn't for the community to do, that it was life. It was happening for me, not against me, not to me, all those. And they are cliches, but they're cliches for a reason. They're truth. And for you and I, this is what we have spent our 20 years realizing, is that all those things that we heard in the very beginning, those truths that have been handed down 1,000 times over, that it is the truth that we're all kind of seeking, that is our reality, which is like life is just quick. You appreciate what you have, you know what I mean? Turn your terrible times into something valuable. As my mom taught me, she pulled me over at the funeral and said, almost angry at me, don't let this be the event that defines you, Jeannie Lynch. Don't be the event that defines you, meaning your life is going to be more than the loss of your daughter. And I remembered thinking, oh my God, have a little compassion right now, Mom. But what she really was saying is, what I've come to understand is, it has become the gift that I have to offer. So, the turnaround for that, or the message at the end of the story, is that when you do that, you become in service, and not in a martyr way, but in a I'm going to turn it into gold kind of a way. Then your life opens up, because I would never have been attracted to you. Our attraction to each other was that we had this grief story in common, that my loved one and your loved one brought us together, and we were going to do that work together. And then in walks our mentor, and in walks the connection to spirit, and then, the path that we've been on. And we've separated, right? Because life happens. I'm in Florida now, you're in Vermont, but we're just as connected as we were from that moment you walked through the bank 20-something years ago to today.
It is so true. I feel just as connected to you today as I did the day we met. We all have that small handful of people we can truly count on no matter what. And Jeannie, you are one of those people for me. Over the years, Jeannie and I have moved through grief in many different ways. And now, years later, our today looks very different than it did back then. She often says she doesn't grieve anymore, but that's not to say that she didn't. And in this part of our conversation, she opens up about that journey, the slow, often unseen road back, how her grief changed, and how she continues to carry Isla's light forward.
I want to go back to this idea that I don't grieve and that, it's been 20 years and I'm on the other side of it and stuff. But I also don't think that I do a really good job in trying to explain to people my grief journey by telling them just how hard it was, because I think a lot of it, you try not to stay in that space. But if I told you I was having out-of-body experiences and I was disassociating. I was post-traumatic stress from taking my daughter off life support. I can't remember the first 2 years, and this is when you and I met. So it isn't that I didn't go through the worst of it. I just can't remember a lot of it because I think I was in such trauma having been in it. But I also believe that it is that journey back from that has been the real journey, so I never want to sound like it wasn't hard for me or that people think, what am I doing wrong if I'm still grieving? And hell no, right? Because there was a period of a few years, and I'm always careful about saying anything linear to anyone in the grief journey because everyone's journey is their own, You and I once went to support you in your suicide prevention, and I remembered this woman getting up and telling the story, and there was not a dry eye in the room, and so at the end we all stood in line to talk to her, and I remember going up to the line and getting to her and saying, "Oh my God, the story you told was so amazing, and do you mind if I ask how long ago?" 25 years ago. When she told me 25 years, she remembered the detail. Like you remember when you found out about your brother. How long did it take you to get through that initial, telling the story of the day you found out? It took a while, right? So, but this woman was still there. And I thought that's a point I guess I want to make, is that so many people that you meet along your own journey will also be teaching you what not to do, but just wow, I don't want to experience it that way, or this way seems to work better for me. And that's all you're trying to do, is navigate your own grief for your own experience, that you can get the furthest out of it, or, whatever. So that's kind of the journey in between the journey, I guess, and making people realize that it isn't like I just got here.
After witnessing Jeannie live without Isla over the years and growing to know her family and friends along the way, I can say with certainty that this journey has been anything but easy. Jeannie's story is one of immense courage and resilience. She made a choice, a sacred, powerful choice, not to let Isla's spirit be lost in that tragic car accident, but to let it live on through her every single day. While I still have both of my children, and I can never fully comprehend the depth of Jeannie's loss, I can tell you this: her strength and grace in the face of such heartbreak make her a true hero in my eyes. She continues to show up in the world with an unwavering spirit, making it a better, more compassionate place just by being in it. Jeannie's journey is a testament to the power of love, the endurance of the human spirit, and the quiet, steady light we can carry even through the darkest times. Her story reminds us that moving forward doesn't mean letting go, but learning how to carry our loved ones with us always. At the end of each episode, I always ask my guests to share a few words of wisdom, something they've learned, something they carry with them. And as I was preparing to bring this episode back 1 year later, I reached out to Jeannie and I asked if there was anything new she wanted to share. Not to change the story, but to honor where she is today. And what she shared with me felt like something more than just words. It was a word she heard, a word that stopped her. Transcendently. And the meaning it holds for her feels like a continuation of Isla's story.
20 years ago, right after Isla died, she was sharing words with me, and I heard this word, and I didn't know what it was when I heard it. She came through in spirit, and so I had to go look up the word. And it has taken me, pretty close to 20 years to learn what the word is, and the word was transcendingly, which is all about just being in the place that is when you're totally beyond it and you've accepted it, and she has and I have, and we're all working in that same place, which is the continuum of life. So that's what I want to share today.
There's something about that word, the way it holds both loss and something beyond it. Not something you move past, but something you carry differently. Jeannie, thanks for sharing that with us today. And as we begin to come to the end of this conversation, I want to bring us back to a question I asked her at the end of last episode. After everything you've walked through, what is it that keeps you smiling today?
Always feeling connected. I'm having a flashback to being at work right after she passed and looking at this beautiful picture that I still have next to my desk today, and missing her energy, and just looking at the picture and remembering what it was like to physically feel her in my space, and just grieving that connection. And somehow in my journey that it came off the photo and it's with me now. I don't feel that separation that I first felt in the very beginning of my grief, which is you just miss them so much physically, right? You miss their smell, you miss the day-to-day activity, you miss the frustration, you miss all of it, right? The experience of having them in your life. And yet today, I don't feel disconnected in any way, and it's been 20 years. So that connection and feeling her connected to me and to all the people that I love in my life through love, I feel very connected and blessed to feel that way. That keeps me smiling.
As Jeannie and I end our conversation, it ends in our usual ways of I love yous and goodbyes.
Love you.
Love you too.
And I leave you with this, a poem called Isla's Moon, written by sweet Elise Tenney at the ripe young age of 8.
If you're up at 9:30, when the moon is up in the starlit sky, you will know why the moon is there, to shine a bright, glittery trail, to a place where happiness is all there is. No wars, no guns, no need to fight. That's the place I'll be tonight.
And now for the What Changed Me community drawing information. Head to changehappenedpodcast.com. Click on the What Changed Me banner to tell us what stayed with you from today's episode or any interview episode you listened to as part of the What Changed Me community drawing. Each time you share, you'll be entered into a Change Happened drawing. You can enter more than once. Every entry is also automatically included into our quarterly drawing for a special Change Happened Super Prize, whether you've won before or not. Change doesn't end the story. It's often where the next chapter begins. If something in today's episode stayed with you, a moment, a sentence, a feeling, I'd love to hear about it. And if someone came to mind while you were listening, consider sharing this episode with them. Because these stories don't end where the episode does. They keep moving forward in what we carry with us and in who we pass them on to. Change Happened, Then What is written, edited, and produced by me, Heather Holt, with the loyal background support from my two sidekicks, Waylon and Dalton. Until next time, keep smiling and maybe let your dog inspire your next big idea.